My sister stole my inheritance and thought she got away with it. Little did she know, I had an ace up my sleeve that would turn the tables completely. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Alex, 32 years old, and up until a year ago, I thought I had a pretty normal family. Boy, was I wrong. This story is about greed, betrayal, and justice, and how I managed to turn the tables on my sister, who thought she had gotten away with stealing my inheritance. It all started when our grandfather, Papa Joe, passed away. He was a remarkable man, kind, generous, and successful. He had built a small empire from scratch, starting with a single hardware store and expanding it into a chain across 3 states. Papa Joe was the glue that held our family together, always there with advice, support, and the occasional stern word when needed. When he died, it hit us all hard. My sister, Sarah, and I were devastated. We had always been close to Papa Joe, spending summers at his lakeside cabin and helping out in his stores during school breaks. He taught us the value of hard work, honesty, and family. Or at least, I thought he had taught us both those values. The reading of the will was scheduled for a month after the funeral. Sarah and I, along with our parents and a few other relatives, gathered in the office of Papa Joe's longtime lawyer, Mr. Goldstein. The atmosphere was tense, to say the least. I could feel the undercurrent of anticipation in the room. After all, Papa Joe's estate was worth millions. Mr. Goldstein cleared his throat and began reading the will. Most of it was pretty standard stuff, personal items left to various family members, donations to Papa Joe's favorite charities, that sort of thing. But then came the big reveal: the bulk of the estate, including the business, was to be split equally between Sarah and me. I was stunned. I knew Papa Joe had always been generous with us, but I never expected this. I looked over at Sarah, expecting to see the same shock and gratitude on her face. Instead, I saw disappointment? Anger? It was gone in a flash, replaced by a neutral expression, but I knew what I'd seen. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings with lawyers and accountants, and trying to wrap our heads around our new reality. Sarah and I were now millionaires and co-owners of a successful business. It should have been exciting, but something felt off. Sarah started acting strange. She was constantly on her phone, having hushed conversations and abruptly ending calls when I entered the room. She suggested we simplify things by having her take over the day-to-day running of the business while I focused on my career as a software engineer. It made sense at the time. She had an MBA and more business experience than I did, so I agreed. That was my first mistake. Over the next few months, I started noticing discrepancies. Money was being moved around in ways that didn't make sense. New consultants were being hired at exorbitant rates. When I tried to talk to Sarah about it, she brushed me off, saying it was all part of her expansion strategy. Then came the bombshell. I received a call from Mr. Goldstein, asking if I was sure about my decision to sign over my shares in the company to Sarah. Apparently, she had submitted paperwork claiming I had agreed to transfer everything to her in exchange for a one-time payout. I was floored. I had never agreed to any such thing. When I confronted Sarah, she didn't even try to deny it. She just looked at me with cold eyes and said, "It's done, Alex. The papers are signed. The money's been transferred. You can't prove anything." In that moment, I realized the sister I thought I knew was gone. In her place was a stranger, consumed by greed and willing to betray her own family for money. I was devastated. Not just because of the money, but because of the betrayal. How could my own sister do this to me? To Papa Joe's memory? I felt lost, angry, and helpless. But then I remembered something Papa Joe used to say: when you're backed into a corner, that's when you need to think smarter, not harder. And that's when I realized, I did have an ace up my sleeve. Something that could turn this whole situation on its head. You see, there was one thing Sarah didn't know. One crucial piece of information that Papa Joe had shared with me years ago, in confidence. It was time to use it. Little did my sister know, her perfect plan was about to unravel spectacularly. The ace up my sleeve was a conversation I'd had with Papa Joe years ago, during one of our fishing trips at the lake. We were sitting in the old rowboat, lines cast into the still water, when he started talking about the family business. "Alex," he'd said, his voice serious despite the peaceful setting, "there's something I need to tell you about the business. Something I haven't told anyone else, not even your parents or Sarah." I remember being surprised. Papa Joe had always been open about the business, encouraging both Sarah and me to learn about it. "What is it, Papa?" I'd asked. He sighed, reeling in his line slowly. "You know how I always say the business started with that one little hardware store on Maple Street?" I nodded. It was a story we'd heard 100 times. Well, that's not the whole truth, he continued. The real start of our family's fortune came from something else. Something I'm not proud of, but something I've been trying to make right ever since. Over the next hour, Papa Joe told me a story that changed everything I thought I knew about our family. Back in the 1960s, before he opened the hardware store, he'd been involved in some shady real estate deals. He'd taken advantage of redlining practices, buying up properties in predominantly black neighborhoods at dirt cheap prices and then selling them at inflated rates to desperate families who couldn't get loans elsewhere. It was wrong, Alex, he said, his voice heavy with regret. I knew it was wrong even then, but I was young and greedy. I told myself I was just being smart, playing the game everyone else was playing. But that doesn't make it right. I was shocked. This didn't sound like the Papa Joe I knew, the man who'd taught us about honesty and fairness. But as he continued his story, I began to understand. The money I made from those deals. That's what I used to start the hardware store. And for years, I tried to forget about where it came from. But I couldn't. The guilt ate at me. He went on to explain that over the years, he'd been secretly using a significant portion of the business's profits to give back to the communities he'd wronged. He'd set up scholarships, funded community centers, and invested in small businesses in those same neighborhoods he'd once exploited. But it's not enough, he said. It'll never be enough to fully right that wrong. That's why I'm telling you this, Alex. Because when I'm gone, I need someone to continue this work. To make sure our family's success keeps giving back to those who are wronged. I was overwhelmed. But Papa, why are you telling just me? Why not Sarah too? He was quiet for a moment, staring out at the lake. Your sister. She's smart, driven. But she sees the world in black and white, profits and losses. You, Alex, you see the shades of gray. You understand that success isn't just about money in the bank. I'm trusting you with this because I know you'll do the right thing, even when it's hard. That conversation had weighed on me for years. I'd kept Papa Joe's secret, honoring his wish to tell Sarah and the rest of the family when the time was right. Now, as I sat in my apartment, reeling from Sarah's betrayal, I realized that time had come. The next morning, I called Mr. Goldstein. I need to see you, I said. It's about Papa Joe's will. There's something you need to know. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Mr. Goldstein's office, the same room where the will had been read months ago. I told him everything Papa Joe had told me. Mr. Goldstein listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each passing minute. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. Alex, he said finally, what you're telling me. It's big. Really big. If this is true, it could change everything about your grandfather's estate. I know, I replied. But it's the truth. And I think it's time everyone knew. Mr. Goldstein nodded slowly. You're right. This information could potentially invalidate the current will. Your grandfather's estate could be subject to claims from the families and communities affected by those old real estate deals. And the ongoing charitable work. That would need to be formalized and continued. I took a deep breath. What do we do now? First, Mr. Goldstein said, reaching for his phone, we need to freeze all assets related to the estate. Then, we'll need to inform the probate court about this new information. It's going to be a complex legal process, Alex. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I thought about Sarah, about how easily she'd betrayed me and Papa Joe's memory. I thought about the communities that had been wronged all those years ago, and the good that could be done with the truth out in the open. I'm sure, I said firmly. It's what Papa Joe would have wanted. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, family confrontations, and media scrutiny. When Sarah found out what I'd done, she was livid. She accused me of making it all up, of betraying the family, of destroying Papa Joe's legacy. But I stood firm. And when the investigation corroborated my story, finding old property records and tracing the money trail, Sarah's anger turned to disbelief, then to a quiet, seething resentment. The probate court ruled that the original will was invalid due to the new information. A significant portion of the estate was set aside for reparations and community investment in the neighborhoods Papa Joe had once exploited. The hardware store chain was to be restructured, with a mandate to continue and expand the charitable work Papa Joe had been doing in secret. As for Sarah and me, we were left with far less than the original inheritance, but with the opportunity to be part of managing the new charitable foundation that would oversee the reparations and community investment. Sarah refused, storming out of the courtroom on the day of the final ruling. But I accepted the responsibility, knowing it was what Papa Joe had been preparing me for all along. It's been a year since then. The foundation is up and running, doing good work in communities that have been overlooked and underserved for far too long. It's not easy, there's a lot of mistrust to overcome, a lot of wounds to heal. But every small victory, every life we manage to improve, feels more rewarding than any amount of money in my bank account ever could. Sarah and I haven't spoken since the court ruling. Last I heard, she'd moved to another state, trying to start over. Part of me hopes that one day she'll understand why I did what I did, that she'll remember the values Papa Joe tried to instill in us. But even if that never happens, I know I made the right choice. As for me, I'm learning every day. About business, about community development, about the long-lasting impacts of systemic inequality. It's challenging work, often frustrating, but always important. Sometimes, when things get tough, I think back to that day on the lake with Papa Joe. I remember the mix of regret and hope in his eyes as he shared his secret with me. And I know that wherever he is now, he'd be proud of what we're doing with his legacy. This journey has taught me that true inheritance isn't just about money or property. It's about values, about the responsibility we have to right the wrongs of the past and to use whatever privileges we have to make the world a little bit better. To anyone out there facing a similar situation, where doing the right thing means going against family, or giving up wealth, or admitting to uncomfortable truths, I want to say this: it's not easy, but it's worth it. The peace of mind that comes from knowing you've honored your principles, that you've chosen integrity over easy money, is worth more than any inheritance. And to Papa Joe, wherever you are, I hope I'm making you proud. I'm doing my best to turn your mistake into a force for good, to make sure your final wish is honored. Your legacy isn't the hardware stores or the money in the bank. It's the lives we're changing, the communities we're helping to rebuild. And that, I think, is an inheritance worth more than all the gold in the world. As I sit here, wrapping up this long tale, I can't help but reflect on how differently things could have turned out. If I had stayed quiet, if I had accepted Sarah's betrayal and walked away with my payout, I might be sitting on a beach somewhere, drink in hand, without a care in the world. But I wouldn't be me. I wouldn't be the person Papa Joe believed I could be. Instead, I'm here, sleeves rolled up, diving into community meetings, poring over development proposals, and working alongside people I never would have met in my old life. It's not glamorous, it's often exhausting, but it's real. It's meaningful. And isn't that what we're all looking for in the end? Not just success, but significance. Not just wealth, but worth. To anyone reading this who might be facing their own moral crossroads, I say, choose the harder path. Choose integrity. Choose to stand for something bigger than yourself. It might cost you in the short term, but the dividends it pays in self-respect and purpose are beyond measure. As for me, I'm just getting started. There's so much more work to do, so many more lives to touch, so many more wrongs to right. But for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. And that, my friends, is an inheritance beyond price. Final update, 5 years later. It's hard to believe it's been 5 years since I last shared my story. So much has changed, yet in many ways, the core of what I've been doing remains the same. I thought it was time for a final update, to bring closure to this chapter of my life and perhaps offer some perspective on the long-term impacts of the choices we make. First, the foundation. What started as a local initiative has grown into something I never could have imagined. We've expanded our work to cover all the areas where Papa Joe's original real estate deals took place, and even beyond. We've helped fund the education of over 500 students, provided seed money for dozens of small businesses, and contributed to the renovation of entire neighborhoods. It's not just about giving money, though. We've worked hard to build trust, to listen to community needs, and to empower local leaders. It's slow work, but it's real and lasting. The hardware store chain, now under new management, has become a model for ethical business practices. They've implemented profit-sharing programs for employees, prioritized hiring from underserved communities, and maintain a commitment to investing a significant portion of profits back into local development projects. It's proof that businesses can do well by doing good. As for Sarah, well, that's a bit more complicated. 3 years after she left, I received a letter from her. It was long, emotional, and clearly difficult for her to write. She admitted that she had been wrong, that her greed had blinded her to the real value of Papa Joe's legacy. The years away had given her time to reflect, to see the bigger picture. We met for coffee a few weeks later. It was awkward at first, years of hurt and resentment hanging between us. But as we talked, really talked, for the first time in years, I saw glimpses of the sister I used to know. She asked about the foundation, listened intently as I explained our projects. By the end of our meeting, she asked if there was any way she could help. Today, Sarah works with us at the foundation. She's not in charge, that trust will take a long time to rebuild, but she's dedicated and hardworking. Her business acumen, once used for selfish ends, now helps us streamline our operations and maximize our impact. It's not a fairy tale ending, our relationship is still a work in progress, but it's a testament to the power of forgiveness and the possibility of change. On a personal note, I got married last year to someone I met through our community work. Maria challenges me every day to think bigger, to do more, to be better. We're expecting our first child in a few months, a daughter we plan to name Joey, after Papa Joe. Looking back, I'm struck by how a single decision can alter the course of so many lives. By choosing to honor Papa Joe's wishes, by choosing integrity over personal gain, I set in motion a chain of events that has touched thousands of lives. It hasn't always been easy. There have been setbacks, disappointments, days when I questioned everything. But I've never regretted my choice. To those who followed my story from the beginning, thank you. Your support and encouragement have meant more than you know. To those just discovering it, I hope it serves as a reminder that it's never too late to do the right thing, that our choices have power beyond what we can see in the moment. As for Papa Joe's legacy, I like to think it's not in the buildings we've renovated or the businesses we've helped start. It's in the spirit of giving back, of righting wrongs, of using privilege to create opportunity for others. It's a legacy that will outlive any of us, rippling out in ways we may never fully know. In the end, isn't that the best inheritance of all? Not money or property, but the chance to be part of something larger than ourselves, to leave the world a little better than we found it. As I prepare to become a parent myself, that's the legacy I hope to pass on to my daughter. The understanding that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch and the good we do. Thank you for allowing me to share this journey with you. Whatever challenges you're facing, whatever choices lie before you, I hope you'll choose courage. Choose integrity. Choose love. The road may not be easy, but I promise you, it's worth it.